So we're back, and so the second blog, or probably the third one, because the other one will probably be cut in two parts. But I decided that I was gonna, when I was looking up black heroes, then I said to myself, hey, you know what? Let me just check out the villain side of things. And believe it or not, there was no categories. I had to actually go through my own memory, so I'm probably gonna get all this wrong. So I'm not even gonna bother saying the first black villain was this or that. I'm just gonna talk about some of my favorite and interesting black villains that I discovered when I was doing research, because the main thing is that you have to think that these creators who made who made the black heroes Africans probably said to themselves, we can't have black villains. I mean, what are people gonna say about us? It's like, that's like saying black people are bad. We can't do that. And it's like, hell yeah, you can, because we growing up with black villains all the time. Like drug dealers, criminals, cops. So yeah, we wanted our black villains too, and that was what was the best thing about Hero for Hire, especially Luke Cage's first series, because he had some really interesting black villains. We're talking about one woman was called the Black Mariah, and she was a big heavyset woman like the Blob. But for people who can remember back then, the Black Mariah was what they called the police wagons. And I never even knew that, but it was like crazy. And but then he also had Cottonmouth and all these other different villains was mad cool. But I figured I'm not gonna deal with Luke Cage's Rose Gallery, because that's a whole nother issue. So I'm looking at Black Manta. He was invented in 1967. Now, Black Manta is a really interesting story, because most people only know him as the guy in a wetsuit with the big helmet on his head, talk like that, and he had laser beams coming out of his eyes. And even in his origins, they couldn't even explain that, But he was retconned like about 3 times, and Black Manta, it's like, on the one hand is that, wait a minute, I had it here. Oh man, see, now that's mad. I read the story, didn't even write it down. Sorry about that, people. But yeah, let's just say, the most famous thing about Black Manta is that he did something that no other villain did before or after. And that was in Adventure Comics 452, 1977, 10 years after he was invented. He was created. Black Manta killed Aquaman's son. And we're not talking about Aqualad. We're talking about his baby son, Arthur Curry Jr. And it was powerful. I remember reading a book when it first came out and everything, and it was like, here you got a guy who's so bad that he killed his son, and Aquaman couldn't save him. He couldn't get there in time, and I think it was like one of those things where it's like, oh my God, are we gonna? It was like the death of Bucky, It was like, because he was a baby, you even also often wondering is this baby gonna actually show up that he's been through a time warp and he's gonna come back as an adult and, Dad, you're not making me killed. No, it's like never, But even in Batman Brave and the Bold, the cartoon series, if anybody would notice that Aquaman and Mera have a young son wearing Aquaman's blue outfit from his second series, and that's Arthur Curry Jr. And it's kind of like in the retcon of a cartoon, he never died. And there was a great episode with Black Manta, the neighbor next door and stuff. But and the son actually, catches him and had to take him to jail and stuff. So that was kind of funny. My son watches that. But Manta, like I said, he when he first came out, he didn't have a name. We didn't know who he was. He was just a guy in a wetsuit. And there was one particular issue that was written in the 70s where the writer decided to take off Manta's helmet. And and they said that this was kind of like, I don't know, it's like an Easter egg or just one story only, but they said that Black Manta was actually, reason why he was so angry was he was trying to save the seas for his people. And he said, "Oh, I said my people. Why do you think they call me a Black Manta?" That's so hot. Now, maybe at the time we thought, "Oh, why my God, it's the first time we're seeing a black villain," you know? And he's like, "Yeah." And then they said in retcon, and they said, "No, that was stupid. We're not going to do that." So then they decided to make it that Black Manta is actually from Zebel, which is where Mira's from. And, you know, and his wife was captured, and they had a son, and, you know, the son was raised in the human world and everything, and that's how we have the new Black Aqualad. Yeah, I didn't like it either. But, you know, hey, you know, they needed it for the Young Justice cartoons, I guess. I don't know. But, you know, we're looking at great series now with Aquaman and the others, and we don't see anywhere any sign of Black Manta's son, Aqualad. So that ought to tell you something. So then we move to 19... Why did I say 86? So then we move to 1975. In 1975, we got this guy named Moses Magnum. Cool, man. He even had that, bald head with the fuzzy little sides, like the guy from Earth, Wind, and Fire. You know who I'm talking about. And he didn't have magnetic powers. At one point, I thought he had magnetic powers, but they say he has seismic energy powers where he could create earthquakes and shock waves. But the reason why I mentioned Moses Magnum is because, one, it's a really cool name, but the other is because he wasn't just like a villain for just one character. I mean, he fought the X-Men, he fought the Spider-Man, fought Fantastic Four, Avengers, you know, so he was like a villain to be reckoned with, and I'm pretty sure Moses will show up again someday. But they'll probably just call him Magnum or something, you know, because that really was a sign of the times to be called Moses Magnum. What the hell was that all about? All right, so then 1976. Now this character I thought was really interesting. Anybody remember the Condor? The Condor from Nova Comics, when Nova first came out. You know, Nova was fighting some strange bad guys and stuff like that, you know, like the Powerhouse or Diamond Head. The Sphinx became his, archnemesis. But then there was this guy called the Condor, and he was a black birdman or a black avian. And it turns out that he was a scientist and all that kind of stuff, bad guy and everything. But he was actually from the same race of avians as Red Raven. Now, what's interesting about this is that Red Raven was a character from the 40s who even had his own comic, Red Raven Comics. And, so he was an avian, wore a red suit and stuff like that. He had wings. But he was like a birdman. And he actually became part of, and this was a retcon, by the way, he actually became part of a 1940s version of the Justice League, or the 1940s version of the Invaders, called the Liberty Legion. You know, and so but the reason why they had to do that was because he, all the other characters were characters, that kind of like Wizard and Miss America and all that were around at the time, and they put them all together into one book. But so he was like a white looking birdman. So what I thought is really interesting is that Condor is a black guy. So it was the first time we actually see that, in an alien race, there are different colors in that species, which is realistic. Nobody's ever done that. It will always be just blue people, orange people, or, just always be one color. So I thought that was fascinating. And they didn't really make any bones about it either. I mean, because he just looked kind of like a bad scientist guy running around with a gun and wings, But, to hear his story, and reading about it, I just thought that was fascinating. So we also already, now, even though I already talked about the Prowler being created in '69, the Prowler was Hobie Brown. And what I thought was really interesting is that In the Ultimate Comics, where we have the Black Spider-Man, which is this 13-year-old kid named Miles Morales, is just the fact that his uncle was the Ultimate Universe version of the Prowler. Now, I actually thought it was his dad, but I didn't read the comics, so I would have known that it was his uncle and stuff like that. But, so I thought that was interesting. But also, what's interesting about our main universe, 616, our main universe of the Prowler, is that even though, like, he had two brothers, one was killed and everything like that, and he thought that the White Tiger, Hector Ayala, killed him and everything, and that was kind of like, so that way the Prowler fights the White Tiger, right? But, like, you gotta also remember, when the Prowler was out, this was when they had the big Treasury Digest versions of the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. So when we saw these issues and these things, it was black and white. But there was the Sons of the Tiger. And remember, the Sons of the Tiger had Abe Brown, who was the Black Tiger. And he actually turns out to be, he was another brother of Hobie Brown. So his brother is Abe Brown, the Black Tiger. And so somehow that all involved them in that nasty mess of fighting for that. And last one, because, two more. 19, because when we talked about all these heroes being African chiefs, when we had to have villains, the villains were represented as Egyptians. Kind of like Havoc. Remember Havoc and the Living Monolith? Even Black Adam looking white, being Tet Adam, who was Egyptian, but kind of sometimes portrayed as gray. So that's what they would do with the Egyptians, who were Africans because they were in Africa, but because of the Ten Commandments and everything, they were represented as gray colors people. So we get the Sphinx, who was Egyptian, in 1977, becoming Nova's archnemesis. And but what's interesting about the Sphinx character was not only was he just this big, ballsy guy, but is that he got immortality and he suffered with it. And he was always trying to find a way of getting rid of it. Like, I don't want to live forever, man. I lived for so long, dude, and I'm so bored. Just kick my ass. Please kick my ass. Take this stone away from me. Do something, man. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Now he just sat around and cried a lot. But he was also, believe it or not, he was the one who also, teamed up with Nova at the time when he had the champions of Xandar and disagreed with the Condor because, Alpha Dogs, hey man, I'm in charge. It's like, no, you're not. I'm going to transform you into a real Condor. And then, and that's what happened. Condor then disappeared for about 20 years. Because he was turned into a condor and everything, so that's why we never seen him. But word is that Condor showed up again in the Guardians of the Galaxy Annihilation Conquest or something like that issues. So Condor is out there. And lastly, we have another Egyptian bad guy, the biggest one of all. In 1986, gave us En-Saba-Nur, the Apocalypse. And the Apocalypse actually was the world's oldest mutant, but he showed up in the 80s. Pretty much as a counterpoint to Cable, Cable's arch nemesis and Cable's from the future. And Cable had the technovirus. And he came back to stop Apocalypse, went all the way back into the past to stop him, and somehow infected Apocalypse when he was a kid with the technovirus. And that actually triggered his mutant powers and turned him into Apocalypse. So it's kind of like, be careful what you wish for, man. You know what I mean? So when they say that whole Hitler paradigm, when they say, would you go back and kill Hitler? Not if I'm going to create more Hitlers. And that's what Cable did. So, self-fulfilling prophecy. So pretty much that's about it. When I looked for black villains, couldn't find any. Sad but true. And but what did we learn here? What we learned is black heroes come from Africa, black villains come from Egypt. I'm hoping you enjoy this blog. Thank you very much, Black Villains, and I really enjoyed this, and I hope to see you guys soon. Peace.